Paula Reed joins me now from FBI headquarters in Washington. And Ron Hosko is a CBS News security analyst and former assistant director of the FBI. He is in our Washington bureau. Paula, let's begin with you. James Comey said that he disagrees with some of the report's conclusions. Where does he disagree with the Inspector General?
Well, the Inspector General concluded that he was insubordinate when he decided to hold a press conference to announce the conclusion of the email investigation without consulting with his boss, Attorney General Loretta Lynch. They also said he went against practice by revealing new emails that had been discovered on Anthony Weiner's computer. So Comey has publicly described this as an impossible choice. He has said specifically that he saw it as two doors. He could either speak or conceal. And the Inspector General specifically rejected that analogy and said, quote, actually, the doors were labeled follow practice and procedure or don't follow practice and procedure. So there's just sort of a discrepancy here. Comey believes he had to do what he did. The Inspector General has said, look, you went against established norms.
Clearly, they see this very differently. Well, Ron, what did you take away from the Inspector General's reports, specifically the assessment of James Comey's actions?
Well, Elaine, I think it was very predictable. I think if you look up the term insubordination or usurp, I think you could see parallels to Jim Comey's actions here. Jim Comey, and I think if you'd seen his book, he does have some explanation there. I think he's given that explanation on his book tour a couple of times. So there is an explanation, but in its purest terms, it looks like Jim Comey did take on the role of the federal prosecutor in July of 2016, and he did box out his superiors from his decision-making process on both that press conference and in the later disclosures to Congress, where he, in effect, went against them because of some warnings from DOJ that he should not proceed in that direction. So I think the criticism of Jim Comey is full-throated. There are certainly criticisms of others in the FBI as well, and of DOJ.
Paula, let me ask you specifically about something in the Inspector General's report, the text between Agent Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Tell us, first of all, the contents of those texts, and also why, based on that content, the Inspector General still concluded there was no evidence of political bias.
Well, first of all, Peter Strzok had a leadership role in both the Clinton investigation and the early stage of the Russia probe. And during this investigation, the Office of Inspector General uncovered thousands of text messages between Strzok and a top FBI lawyer, Lisa Page. And in these text messages, the Office of Inspector General suggests that the two show political bias. Now, they make disparaging comments about both candidates, but the Office of Inspector General said their text, their communication, it sort of discredits themselves and raises questions about whether the FBI was impartial. There is one specific text that is getting a lot of attention. In that text messages, Page texted Strzok saying something to the effect of, Trump won't win. Strzok responds saying, no, he won't. We'll stop it. And that is, of course, something that a lot of people would read and think, well, was he doing something with the investigation to try to block a presidential candidate's fair chance of being elected? And in the report, Elaine, the furthest that the Inspector General will go is they say that, look, when he had to make a decision whether or not to sort of press the pause button on the Russia probe and go back to the Clinton investigation after these Anthony Weiner emails were discovered, he decided not to do that for at least 3 weeks. He continued to pursue the Russia investigation, and the Office of Inspector General said it is concerned about that specific decision.
Well, Ron, the Inspector General also found that James Comey sometimes used a personal email account for FBI business. Why is that problematic for any employee, and especially the director of the FBI?
Well, FBI business is supposed to be conducted on FBI devices. Those devices are on FBI-owned servers. They talk through FBI-owned servers. And those communications are saved. So if there's later need for evaluation, examination, or if they're part of the official record. And when you start to do things on a personal email account or some other means of communication, that defeats that essential purpose, whether it's for government record keeping or for potential review later. And some of it is, frankly, the very activity that the FBI was investigating Hillary Clinton for. So there's a bit of hypocrisy there, if that was the case. And that certainly, when Jim Comey is standing in front of an audience condemning someone else for related conduct, he ought to be pure himself.
Well, Paula, does this report vindicate any of President Trump's past criticisms of the Clinton email investigation?
Well, surprisingly, arguably shockingly, he hasn't publicly responded. Today, the White House press secretary said that they believe that this report vindicates the president's assessment of the Clinton email probe and also his concerns about the origins of the Russia probe. But the fact is that this report vindicates the Clinton email investigation itself, saying that it was concluded without political bias and there was no prosecutable case. In her interview that the president has often criticized how that was conducted, they said it was completely appropriate. So actually, this report really undercuts the president's argument that the Clinton email investigation was rigged or botched. But when it comes to the origins of the Russia probe, it is expected that the president and his allies will hone in on those struck page text messages to raise more questions about whether or not there was political bias at the outset of the Russia probe.
So will this report, Paula, impact the special counsel's Russia investigation at all?
It remains to be seen. This is not the last investigation into an investigation. The Office of Inspector General is now working on sort of Act 2 of this investigation, and they will dig deeper into the decisions that were made at the beginning of the Russia investigation, which overlapped a little with the end of the Hillary Clinton email probe. So we are going to get a similar report in a year, 2, 3, Elaine, who knows, but we will get another investigation into the special counsel probe eventually from the Inspector General. But in the interim, the president and his allies are doing all they can to sow doubts about the impartiality of that probe.
Well, Ron, FBI Director Christopher Wray laid out plans to improve the Bureau's conduct Thursday. What stood out to you from his comments?
Well, first, the apparent seriousness and disappointment that he expressed in the content of this report, the seriousness with which he is taking these recommendations. We really didn't hear any pushback from Christopher Wray on what the Inspector General found. And I think that's been kind of the supposition in some news outlets and commentators recently that this must be now cooked by DOJ and the FBI, where they're going to undermine everything Horowitz had to say. That's not the case. This is very blunt criticism in a lot of ways, and I think the director is determined to take it very seriously and take corrective action, including serious disciplinary action where it's appropriate.
All right, Paula Reed and Ron Hosko, thanks to you both.
You're welcome.